Let's face it, navigating the wild world of dating, especially in this day and age as a believer, can be very difficult. Even if you're not a believer, because at the end of the day, you're trying to find someone that matches you and fits you best. But at the same time, as a Christian who is looking to date and eventually marry, it is very important that the verse that seems to always come back to us when we are in the dating stage of something or looking to pursue to marry, it's important to keep in our minds to be equally yoked with the person that we are having an intent to marry and who we are dating. So what does being equally yoked mean? It means to be paired with someone of the same kind, capable of working together toward a common goal with similar capabilities and temperaments. And no, I'm not talking about egg yolks. I'm talking about with animals. As seen in the picture below, a yoke is a wooden bar that joins two animals together for work, such as pulling a plow or a cart. And the problem is, at least in this picture, is that if an ox and a donkey are paired being yoked together, because they're fundamentally different creatures, which leads to strain, disorder, frustration. They're different sizes. They both have different strength capabilities. So they're bound to struggle with whatever they're pulling because they're not the same thing. They're two different creatures entirely, which means that, you guessed it, they're unequally yoked. And the verse that this whole equally yoked and to not pair ourselves with unequally yoked people, that comes from the verse in 2 Corinthians 6:14, and it says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, for what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness?" An example of a believer and an unbeliever being unequally yoked is in that picture that I just showed, with the ox and the donkey, both having the yoke on them and pulling it, and they're bound to face struggles, just like a believer dating a non-believer are bound to have struggles in their relationship, deeply rooted because the believer wants to have a marriage and a future focused and centered on Christ, whereas the unbeliever, not so much. And another thing that points to being unequally yoked and why it's never bound to work, especially in a relationship, is in Mark 3, verse 25. If a house is divided against itself, then it cannot stand. So if you can't even come to terms and be on the same page with being both followers of Christ, then the marriage sooner or later is most likely not going to work out. Or if it does continue on, it's going to be a very, very miserable one, relationship or marriage. Charlie Kirk said it best in one of his recent debates within the past year, is the things you should agree on before marrying someone is being on the same page with faith-wise and agreeing on which morning time news show to talk about. So being on the same page politically and faith-wise, those are probably the two top priorities you should have when focusing on relationships, getting into a relationship with someone. You want to be aligned on those two things, I think, first and foremost. The rest can work itself out in the end. You can have little disagreements on which streaming service you like better, which music streaming service. Like, for example, I love Apple Music. I've always used Apple Music. My girlfriend actually likes Spotify. And we have little debates here and there about that, about which is better. And that's okay. You can disagree on the little stuff. But the big stuff, like faith, politics, you really should be on the same page with that, because I can tell you that from experience. I'm not going to go too much into detail about it, but I was in a past relationship where we did not agree on dang near anything. And that was a major problem, and that is, long story short, why it didn't work out. But now I can happily say that I put my faith at the forefront, and that's been my main focus, and that's where I get my politics from and my beliefs on that spectrum from. And the both of us, with me and my new girlfriend, who I intend to marry one day, right from the get-go, our very first date, we talked about faith, we talked about politics, and our alignments on that spectrum. And I think that boldness really says a lot, because it allows us not to waste our time. And we just got those conversations out of the way quick. We still talk about those things because we obviously agree, and we enjoy talking about politics and faith, of course, as we should. But being on the same page with those two things I cannot stress enough how important they are. And because the main thing to remember is that, yes, it's going to cause the relationship to be a very difficult one and not very pleasant when you are unequally yoked with your partner. But the main thing is, for the believer, it is detrimental to your faith, because I can tell you from experience that in my last relationship, I was of the notion that, oh, I can change her mind. I can show her the light. I can show her the truth. But in actuality, it was the opposite. I was trying to pull her towards Christ, but I was being pulled away from Christ in the process, and I was kind of shooting myself in the foot in that sort of way, which is so counterproductive, and it's only going to be worse for you in the end if you try and force that envelope. So to close out this video, what does this all mean for believers who are looking towards marriage in a relationship? It wouldn't be, basically, to put it simply, it wouldn't be in your best interests at all to covenant with or yoke yourself to an unbeliever, no matter how you feel about them. It may seem a little bit harsh at first, but believe me, it's put into place for your own good. And God, He's not a selfish God. He's not just doing it to make you upset. He's doing it for your own good, and because He doesn't want you to turn your back on Him. He wants you all in with Him, and the only way that can happen is if you yoke yourself with a fellow believer, and it's only going to produce a much more fruitful relationship and between you and your partner, and a much more fruitful relationship with you and Christ. And just like we talked about earlier with the ox and the donkey being two completely different creatures, a believer and an unbeliever are two totally different creatures as well, as one has been born again to be a new creation, and the unbeliever is still trapped in their sin and still the same old creation that they were born in when they were born into the sinful world. But guys, so that's going to do it for this video on just dating, what I've learned from my experiences, and just learning to always put Christ first and find someone else that feels equally the same as you. And I'm not saying it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows if you do those things. It's always relationships are not easy, so make sure you are ready for a relationship if you wish to, shoot your shot with a God-fearing woman or man. So guys, that's going to do it for this video. Be sure to leave a comment down below if this video helped you at all, and what you think I should have added if you think it would have been beneficial. But guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.